Hey, what is up guys, it is Mike here, and today I'm going to be showing you my top 10 horror games of 2014. So let's jump right into it. Up at number 10 we have Outlast Whistleblower. Now I know this is not technically a game, it's a DLC, but it's good enough in my opinion to be featured on this list. The whole thing is set in a mental asylum, and it also ties a bunch of loose ends that were left by the original game. And yeah, the environment and atmosphere are extremely creepy, and also of course the antagonists are all completely psychopathic and their personalities really stick with you. Just like in the original game, there are plenty of jump scares, and the only item you have access to is your camera. The game is very gory and has a few particularly disturbing scenes for which you really need to have a fairly strong stomach, and also the game relies much more on jump scares than the first game. And yeah, it relies a little bit less on atmosphere than in the first game to scare you, and has a higher rate of jump scares overall, so if you don't like jump scares, don't play this game. And finally, to top it all off, it has a pretty cool WikiLeaks-ish story. And now for number 9 we have another indie horror game called Betrayer. Betrayer is a sort of first-person horror exploration game. The game is open world, and it also has a fast traveling system very similar to that from the Elder Scrolls. Stealth is a huge element in the game, and the way you kill enemies is by creeping up on them and by hiding your movements by timing them with strong gusts of wind. You have a variety of 17th century weapons such as bows, crossbows, tomahawks, pistols, and muskets, so it's really like, you know, New World style old school. And also the death system is very similar to Dark Souls, where if you die you have to get back to your corpse to retrieve your items, and if you die a second time before being able to get back to your body, you will lose all of the items and equipment that you have failed to retrieve. So yeah, all in all, it's a really cool sort of horror indie experience that has a really unique style and setting. Definitely not the quality of some more AAA games out there, but it offers a nice unique experience for sure. And after number 8 we have a really cool indie game called Neverending Nightmares. The game developer Matt Gilgenbach created this game to symbolize his struggles with OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, and depression. The game only uses shades of grey and shades of red in its art style. It follows the struggles of Thomas, who goes through one nightmare into another, hence the title. And every time he's done with one nightmare, he wakes up into another nightmare that is even worse. The game does have jump scares, but it mostly relies on setting and ambiance to make you feel horrified, and it has a lot of really disturbing imagery. And also the game offers a few choices here and there, and these choices actually affect how the game will end. So there are actually multiple endings possible depending on how you played. However, remember that this is an indie game and it won't last as long as a lot of AAA games out there, so expect this to be very short, sort of like Dear Esther, you know, or Journey. So of course, it's not for everyone, but I do recommend picking it up, especially considering that right now it is on sale. And after number 7 we have The Evil Within. This game was made by Tango Gameworks collaborating with Shinji Mikami, the guy who made Resident Evil, which is not too surprising considering the fact that the game is very similar to Resident Evil 4 in many aspects. The game has been criticized for not being focused on the pure horror and for being more focused on action, so like I said, this game is very much like Resident Evil 4. It has a pretty cool atmosphere and it's very gory. Also, if you are very observant, you will find many things hidden throughout the game that will explain to you more about the lore and the story. But yeah, otherwise it has some really cool, disgusting sort of monsters if you're into that kind of stuff. The enemies are kind of like a mix between Resident Evil enemies and Silent Hill enemies, so that's pretty interesting. It also has some, you know, pretty elaborate and intense boss battles. But yeah, otherwise the soundtrack is really nice, and all in all, this is a pretty cool game if you like Resident Evil. And now for number 6 we have Among the Sleep. This is another indie horror game developed by Norwegian studio Krillbite Studio. It's a game where you play as a child, which is a pretty unique concept, and yeah, you are literally a toddler. The game deals with extremely sensitive subjects, which I can't get into too deeply without spoiling the game, but yeah, it does touch subjects such as, for example, child abuse and that kind of stuff. So it can definitely be hard to play for people who went through that in the past, and so, you know, of course, trigger warning. And the game also supports Oculus Rift, so that's pretty cool. And of course, since you are a toddler, you can't really defend yourself, so you have to be very careful, you know, and trying to run and hide sometimes. Very similar to, say, Amnesia. And also throughout the game, you have a little teddy bear friend who helps you out. And the teddy bear is actually voiced by Roger Laban Jackson, who's the same guy who voiced Ghostface in Scream. And also, what I find interesting about this game is that the whole world is filtered through the toddler's mind. And so you don't actually see the world as a normal adult, you actually see it with an added filter of imagination. So yeah, once again, again, pretty cool indie horror game, not very long, but like most indie games, this one offers a pretty unique experience. And after number 5, we have Alien Isolation. So after the whole controversy surrounding alien colonial marines, this game is pretty much like a breath of fresh air, to be honest. The game recreates very well the fear brought by the original Alien movie. And of course it is set in space where no one can hear you scream, so that helps. This is a really solid horror experience. It uses audio very well, it has really cool graphics, and yeah, it's just a very solid horror experience. Many people consider this to be possibly the best game of 2014, although I wouldn't go that far. But I would go as far as saying this is quite possibly the best Alien game out there. And I mean, I'm not exaggerating, this game has had positive reception pretty much across the board. And also, once again, this is one of those games that has a very similar style to Amnesia in terms of AI. So if you enjoyed Amnesia, you'll probably enjoy this game as well. And also, finally, the game has a pretty cool story that ties into the original Alien story. So that is awesome indeed, and I think this game also works with Oculus. And after number 4, we have PT. This game was originally proclaimed to be a new IP created by 7780s Studio, which actually ended up being fake. It was revealed that PT was actually a playable teaser for the upcoming Silent Hills game. The teaser was the result of a collaboration between Kojima and Guillermo del Toro. According to Kojima himself, the intention behind the demo was to make the player quote-unquote shit their pants. So the way the game works is, first of all, there is no combat, and the goal of the game is pretty much to explore this creepy hallway and all of its loops until you hear a phone ring. Once that happens, you have to zoom in on the phone and you will hear the message, "You've been chosen," which then opens the final door, and it is at that point that the new Silent Hill trailer can be watched, which reveals to you, of course, that the whole thing is set in the Silent Hill universe. And yeah, the playthrough time to finish the whole demo can actually range quite greatly because the requirements for the phone call are actually very vague. And after number 3, we have The Last of Us Remastered. This is of course an improved version of the original PS3 Last of Us. This is hands down one of the best narrative experiences for video games pretty much ever. The whole game is pretty much centered on the evolving relationship between Ellie and Joel, the two sort of main protagonists, and this game has been widely regarded as a masterpiece from Naughty Dog. I wouldn't say it's the scariest game out there, it has a few jump scares here and there, but in my opinion, the main appeal of this game is the narrative side. And also, of course, the immersion, because the world is just so realistic, and it is a very interesting portrayal of how the world would be if we were in fact to live in a post-apocalyptic zombie-infested planet. And the zombies themselves are so cool. They're not just normal, average zombies. They have this really interesting fungus infection that has its own unique biological rules by how it spreads. And yeah, just all in all, the game has an amazing attention to detail, and you have to play the game multiple times to, experience it fully. And after number 2, we have an indie horror game called Dread Halls. Now this game is made specifically for the Oculus Rift. And if that sounds terrifying, it sure is, because the whole idea of being immersed in a VR world that also happens to be set in a horror universe really shows one of the biggest strengths of VR in gaming. And yeah, the whole game is set in a dungeon underground, and you are holding a map at all times, and you have to sort of find your way. And yeah, the whole thing is just really creepy and claustrophobic. This game honestly makes me terrified when I think about the potential for horror games for virtual reality. It just goes so much further than the usual, play on the screen type of game. I'm actually a bit worried that it might go a little bit too far, it's almost like it's real life or something. And the game also uses procedurally generated algorithms, aka roguelike algorithms, to keep the whole thing fresh and of course to keep the jump scares scary. So yeah, all in all, this is quite possibly currently the scariest game for Oculus Rift, and also, by the way, the developer recommends highly that you play this game with an Xbox controller, and I think that's actually a good rule of thumb for most Oculus games. But anyway guys, now for number 1, I think a lot of you guys expected this. We have Five Nights at Freddy's. This is an independent horror game made completely by solo game developer Scott Cawthon, who actually tried to make children's games before but had complaints that his game characters looked very much like quote-unquote animatronics. And so after going through a severe depression and actually considering quitting games forever, he decided why not make a horror game centered on this concept. And so that is exactly what Five Nights at Freddy's is. You have to survive 5 nights as a security guard while a bunch of creepy kid mascots try to kill you. I think the easiest way to explain the game is it's kind of like Pac-Man, but you can't move. Yep, you heard me correctly, you can't move. So if this game sounds like it's one of the most terrifying games ever made, it sure is. Also, the animatronics are specifically coded to jump scare you when you least expect it. And so even though the jump scares are always the same, somehow they always work. Oh, and by the way, Scott released a second game only 3 months after the first game. So if you don't feel like you have had enough of a heart attack playing the first game, there is a second one. Hey there, thanks for watching my video. If you've made it this far in the video, thank you so much, I honestly appreciate it. And otherwise, why not go one step further and subscribe? I'm gonna leave a little link right here you can press on to subscribe to my channel for more top 10s and gaming videos. And yeah, otherwise, if you're on mobile, just press the little red button under the video. And also, why not leave a like? It helps a lot. So thanks for watching, guys, and otherwise, I will see you next time. Peace